Okay, good morning, Rabbi Rabotai. We're continuing our Masechet Berachot, and we are on Daf Nun Bet Amud Bet 52b, the top of the Amud, and the Limud of Amud Yomi for Chodesh Tevet has been sponsored by Shaban Shena Rabbi for health, happiness, and prosperity of their family, and the Refuah Shelema of Rachel Bat Miriam and Miriam Bat Nosrat Avraham. They should have Refuah Shelema. Amen. So we are on top of the Amud, 4 lines down, and now we are discussing what exactly the machloket of Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai depends on. As we learned in the last shiur, Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai disagree on the order of things, whether or not you wash your hands prior to drinking wine, which is prior to eating bread. They used to sit and drink wine before they started the Suda. Or do you drink your wine, and then when you're ready for Suda, you wash the Netilat Yadayim, and then you start your Suda. Bet Shammai say that you start the Netilat Yadayim already in the very beginning, before you start drinking wine. And Bet Hillel say, no, you have your wine with your regular hands, and then after you're done, before you start the Suda, that's when you wash your hands in Netilat Yadayim and you start. What is this? And both of them, by the way, we went through the process of what they hold. Both of them are preventing you from eating Suda with hands that are tameh, sheniot latuma, right? Because as we mentioned, when you have the cup, right, if the outside of the cup is wet, then it could transfer tum'ah, and it could be either of the 2 ways. Either your hands are wet, and therefore, when you touch a kli that's tameh on the outside, sheni latum'ah, the water that's on your hand becomes rishon latum'ah, making your hands sheni latum'ah. And then when you eat seudah, you're eating with tameh hands. Or the reverse, that your hands are tameh, right? And the water there could transfer the tum'ah from your hands to the kli, and the kli becomes tameh, right? Bet Shammai said one way. Bet Shammai was concerned about making the kli tameh. Bet Hillel was concerned for making your hand tameh. They focused on different things, but both of their concern was the same thing, that you're going to end up eating with tameh hands. So the Gemara says, what is the machloket over here? What exactly is driving where the starting point is? One of them starts from this way, the other one starts from this way. What is exactly the driving force behind the machloket? Says the Gemara, take a look at the second line. B'mai kam miflegi. What is this, the core concept that the machloket depends on? Bet Shammai savri asur lishtamesh bekeli shenitmeu achorav. Bet Shammai hold that you cannot use a kli that's tameh during the Suda. When you're eating pat, when you're eating bread, during Suda, you cannot use kelim that are tameh. Why can't you use a kli that's tameh? Forget about this whole thing of wine, netilat yadayim, forget about all of that. A separate halacha, well, connected, but separate, that during the course of Suda, your hands are not wet, nothing is wet, you're just having Suda. Can you use a kli that's tameh on the outside? In other words, it's a tumah darabanan. Remember, we mentioned tumat mashkim is a tumah darabanan. Therefore, Chazal made a gezerah that it only makes the outside impure, makes the outside tameh, inside, and the top of it, all of that is tahor. In other words, you had a mashkim that was tameh that touched the kli, and the outside now is sheni latum'ah, and now it's dry. This happened yesterday. Now you have it in the closet. Can you bring and use that cup, that kli, on your table for Suda? Bet Shammai says you cannot do it. You cannot use a kli that's tameh during Suda. Why can't you? Because they are hoshesh, they are concerned that while you're drinking from this, nitzosot, a splashes of drink could splash outside, and that's all you need to get yourself into trouble, because now that drink, that mashke, becomes rishon letum'ah, and your hands become sheni letum'ah. You end up eating your bread with hands that are tameh. Therefore, Bet Shammai would never allow on your table a kli that's tameh. Period. That's where it starts from. So automatically, because they will never have it, that you have a kli that's tameh on the table, automatically you have no concern for the kli making you tameh, because the kli is never tameh. It's not allowed. So therefore, the only concern they have is when you sit by that table, your hands have to be tahor. And hence, the halakha Bet Shammai that you have to wash your hands before you sit to drink wine. Because if you don't wash your hands Netilat Yadayim, then stam yadayim is shniot latumah, we said yesterday. Chazal instituted that your unknown status of your hands is shniot latumah. So as your hands is shniot latumah, if you have some drinks on the outside of the tahor kli, of the pure clean, then you touch it, the water becomes rishon latumah, and right away your kli became sheni latumah, and that you cannot have according to Bet Shammai. Bet Hillel is not concerned about nitzosot. It's not concerned. Usually, you don't bang your cup on the thing that the splashes are going to go all over the place. You drink like a mensch. There's no splashes anywhere. They're not concerned about that. Hence, Bet Hillel is not concerned about having a kli that's tameh sheni on your shulchan. They allow it. Say, well, as long as your hands are clean, you're fine. The problem is, and we're not worried that there's splashes on the kli. We just want to make sure that your hands don't become tameh. So therefore, I'm not going to allow you to wash your hands and right away get a cup, because it takes a little bit time for your hands to fully dry. If you do it right away, we're worried that there's some moist, enough to make something else wet. You didn't dry it well, and then you touch the cup is sheni. Now I just washed my hand, and I'm thinking my hand is clean, but what just happened is I have water on my hand, I touched this cup, this was sheni, the water became rishon, made my hand sheni, and now I'm having tameh hands during the course of Suda. So therefore, Bet Hillel says, we don't allow that. How you do it? You there's no problem with having a cup that's tameh. So sit and drink as much as you want. Then go do Netilat Yadayim. And now you're not drinking anymore. You're eating. Your hands are clean. You're eating your food, and everything is fine. That's the driving force of the machloket the Gemara is going to say. So I explained the next 5-6 lines of the Gemara. Now we're going to actually read it inside. So says the Gemara. Take a look at the second line. What is the machloket of Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai? Bet Shammai savri asur leishtamesh bekeli shenitmeu achorav. Bet Shammai hold you cannot use a kli, a vessel that the back of it is tameh during Suda. This is a regular halacha, not necessarily connected with our discussion back and forth. This is a simple halacha that Bet Shammai hold, of course, is related to the subject that we've had. Why is that? Gezerah mishum nitzosot. Because we are concerned that splashes of the drink are going to get on the back of the kli, on the outside of the kli. And if that happens and the kli was tameh on the outside, then the water becomes, the drink becomes rishon letumah, and making your hand tameh sheni letumah. Gezerah mishum nitzosot veleka lemigzar shema yetameu hamashkin shebeyadayim bekos. And on the other hand, Bet Shammai hold that there's no room for concern shema yetameu hamashkin shebeyadayim, because that the water that you have on your hand is going to become tameh with the cup. Why? Because we just mentioned that Shammai does not allow a cup that's tameh on the table. So therefore, the water on your hand, which your hand is tahor because you just washed it, will never become tameh from the kli, because the kli would never be tameh according to Bet Shammai. No tameh kli is allowed on the shulchan. So even if your hands are wet because you just washed your hands and you grab the cup, so what? The cup is never tameh, and you're safe. That is the shita of Bet Shammai. On the other hand, says the Gemara, ubet Hillel savri mutar leishtamesh bekeli shenitmeu achorav v'mashkin. It is mutar to have on your table that you're eating seudah kelim that's tameh. You know how difficult it is to only keep kelim that are tahor? It's not practical. So it's mutar. They say it's fine to bring kelim that are tameh, tumah d'Rabbanan, of course, on the outside on your table, as long as you make sure that your hands don't become tameh. When everything is dry, there's no reason for your hands to become tameh, because kelim don't make, we said this yesterday, we're going to say it again today, a kli does not make a person tameh unless you have drink, unless you have liquid. So the Beit Hillel says, well, usually you don't have liquid during the Seudah. Usually we're not concerned about things splashing on the outside. So everything is dry, you're good to go. You can have kelim that are tameh on the outside during Seudah, and nothing is wrong with that. So says the Beit Hillel, therefore, because it's mutar to have a kli that's tameh on the shulchan, on your table, now we are concerned about the kli making your hands tameh. So now, first of all, why is it that mutar to have a kli that's tameh on the shulchan? Because they're not choshesh for nitzosot. But we're not concerned about splashes of water on the outside. Amri nitzosot lo shechichi. It's not common to have splashes on the back of the kli. So therefore, the real concern is maybe the water, if you wash the tliat yadayim before drinking, maybe your hands are going to be wet, and the wetness, the water, the liquid on your hands is going to touch the tum'ah and become tameh rishon letum'ah, right? Because the liquid that touches the sheni letum'ah becomes rishon letum'ah and makes your hands now sheniot latum'ah, your hands are tameh, and then you go on to touch the bread and eat seudah with hands that are tameh, right? Davar acher, the Beit Hillel say another reason also, techef lenetilat yadayim seudah. Right immediately after netilat yadayim should be seudah. The Gemara says, wait a second, how is that connected with tumah v'tahara? Why is that another reason for tumah v'tahara? My davar acher. What do you mean davar acher? The Gemara explains, haki kamar. That's how they're saying it. They're not saying that this is connected with the halachot of tumah v'tahara. They're saying another reason. Haki kamri leu bet Hillel bet Shammai. Ledidchud amritu asur ishtamesh bekeli. He says, we understand where you're coming from, Bet Shammai. We have our concerns. You have your concerns. We are starting from different places. As we explained, they're both concerned that your hands should not end up being tameh. Just that Bet Hillel starts from a concern, maybe your hands are going to become tameh from the kli. Bet Shammai are concerned that maybe the kli is going to become tameh from your hand, and then you get into trouble in the seudah when, again, the splashes go on the kli and now make your hand tameh. But both of them, the concern is hands. So Bet Hillel says, we understand, we start from here, you start from here, but you have to agree with us that our concern is superior, because there is another halacha that will tell you have to wash right before bread, and that is the halacha in Hilchot Seudah. Has nothing to do with Tumah v'Tahara. Now we've been very busy with Tumah v'Tahara, but this is basically, you can't lose sight of that basic halachot of Seudah. The basic halacha in Seudah is techef l'netilat yadayim Seudah. Immediately after netilat yadayim, you should start your Seudah. What are you doing? you're doing Netilat Yadayim, and you're sitting there sipping wine for half an hour, and then you want to start your Suda. That's not Techef Netilat Yadayim Suda. So therefore, says Bet Hillel, we have an edge over your concern, because even though that we both have the same concern starting from two opposite sides, but we have on our side an assisting halacha called Techef Netilat Yadayim Suda. So says the Gemara, let's read this inside. Hachi ka'amri lehu Bet Hillel lebet Shammai ledidchud amritu asur l'ishtamesh bekeli she'achorav tameh. Even according to what you hold, that it's asur to have on the table of Suda a kli that's tameh, the gazrinan mishum nitzosot, because you are concerned about splashes of liquid on the outside of the kli. Afilu hachi, even with all of that, ha'adifa, our concern is more preferable, it's more important, because you have an assisting concept from Hilchot Seuda, the Techef Netilat Yadayim Seuda, because immediately after Netilat Yadayim, you should be starting your Seuda. Okay, great. Next part of the Mishnah. Now you think you're done, we're not done yet. Next part also is Tuba V'Tahara, and then we let loose a little bit.
What does Shammai do with the
They say it's not possible. This is as techef as possible. Again, their principle is very strong. They say you cannot have a kli that's tameh on the shulchan. So you can't do it. You can't do it. That's my suda. I'm starting it right now by drinking. So,
Rabbi, how can you have the fix or
how can you have?
How can you tell? How can
Well, they kept track of everything. Yeah, we don't understand when you live a life of Tumah V'Tahara, you have to be mindful of every single thing that's around you, right? Chazal talk about a Talmid Chacham, a Chaver, would not touch even the clothing of someone that's not a Chaver, because there may be a Zav, maybe a this. Can you imagine, like, you're going through life, everything that you touch or you sit on, or everything you're mindful of what exactly I'm doing. It's a completely different life. We live a popcorn eating life, and it's like mindlessly going through life, stumbling upon life. But when you have Tumah V'Tahara, you have to be concerned about everything. This is Ra'ui Lekabel Tumah. This one, the rain that came on it. This one is this. This one is that. This level of Tumah. That level of Tumah. And it's a mindfulness of Kedusha, which is very, very special. Zat Hashem, soon we should have it. Says the Gemara, B'Shamai Omri Mekaneach. So we had another machloket. Where do you put the towel? Right? Where do you put the towel? Now, you think this is an innocent machloket. It's not innocent. It's far from innocent. Right? Again, the machloket is you do the Netilat Yadayim, you dry your hands with the towel, and that's the towel that you keep, next to you. So where do you put this? Do you put it on the chair, on the bench, or do you put it on the table?
Why wouldn't they just get rid of that towel and use a dry towel and then avoid the whole situation?
They weren't rich. So says the Gemara, right? That would be easier. It's if you did, or for that matter, you don't have it, you have a different one. If the towel is not wet to the degree that would make something else wet, we would be fine to go also. The whole chashash is if the towel is wet enough to make something else wet, then you have the following problems. Now, what is the core machloket? What is the machloket? What's the explanation of the machloket? Bet Shammai say you keep it on the shulchan. Bet Hillel say you keep it on the chair. Why? What's the difference? Says the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan. Bet Shammai omrim mekaneach yadav b'mapa u'manicha ala shulchan. You clean your hands with a towel and you put it on the shulchan. Why? Shemata omer ala keset, because what's the alternative? You got to put it on the chair. You know what happens if you put that towel on the chair? Maybe the chair is tameh, and your mapa, your towel is wet. So what happens is the mashkin, the liquid in the towel, if it's wet enough, will become tameh from the kesed. They'll become rishon latumah. And now, v'yachzeru v'tamu et hayadayim. Next time you wipe your hand on the towel from the food you're eating, now your hand became sheni latumah. And here we go again. The same problem that we discussed before. You can't have hands that are tameh. That's how you do it yadayim beforehand. You can't have hands that are tameh during Suda. So the Gemara says basically, just in parentheses, why wouldn't the chair itself make the mapa tameh? In other words, you're telling me that you have to go through this whole loop of the chair making the water tameh that makes your hand. Just say the chair is going to make the mapa tameh. Says the Gemara, en kli metameh kli. A kli cannot be metameh something else without liquid, right? Fine. When a tameh, unless you have a higher level of tumah, let's just read the next line and we'll explain this. But a tameh kesed legavra. If the chair is tameh, let the chair make me tameh directly. Says the Gemara, en kli metameh adam. A kli cannot make you tameh. Even if it's rishon l'tumah, cannot make me tameh. Unless the kli is avatuma, then it becomes a difference. Then it's completely different subject, which would actually happen if you have a zav, for instance, that sat on a chair. That chair could make somebody else tameh. And we are not. Zav is a higher level of tumah with not regular but specific emissions from their body, which would render them a higher level of tumah. And that actually could, the chair that Zav sat on, could make somebody tameh. Why we are not concerned about that? We're not concerned about that. Why? Some of the Rishonim explain that that's because people were careful. In those levels of tumah, people were always mindful. You would never end up with just the innocent chair sitting there and being a tumah Zav. However you understand that, we're not talking about a higher level of tumah. Rishon tumah, says the Gemara, en keli metameh adam. A kli does not make a person tameh. So that's with mashkin. Yeah, that's the Gemara's question. It says, why do you have to go through the loop of liquids transferring the tumah? Why can't it be direct? And Gemara says directly doesn't happen. So that's Bet Shammai. And why can you put it on the shulchan? In other words, what's the difference between shulchan and the chair? Because as we're going to see, not only Bet Shammai do not let a cup that's tameh on the shulchan, they don't let a shulchan that's tameh altogether. Bet Shammai hold you cannot eat on a shulchan that's tameh. Shulchan has to be tahor. And everything that's on it has to be tahor. So therefore, you put the mapa on the shulchan is tahor, and you're good to go. So that's how they avoid all the problems. Say, don't put your hands are clean. You just wash it yadayim. You dried it with towel. The towel is wet. Put the towel on the table, and your table now is good because the table could never be tameh, and therefore your mapa, your towel will always stay clean, and you could wipe your hands from the food that you're eating on it during the whole Suda, and you're good to go. Now, why is it, that's a very big chumrah, that your table can never be tameh? You can never have a kli that's a shulchan that's tameh. Why is that? Because Bet Shammai has a starting point for this. Not that one day they woke up, they say, oh, well, let's not use ever a shulchan that's tameh. You know what the big chumrah that is, you know how difficult that is to keep? The reason they're pushed to say that is because they have a gezerah. Bet Shammai holds you can never use a shulchan that's sheni latumah even. We're talking a sheni latumah, not rishon latumah. Rishon latumah we'll see is more complicated. Even a shulchan that's sheni latumah you cannot use. Why? Because if you would be a kohen eating truma on that table, we mentioned yesterday that truma could become shlishila tum'ah. And therefore, you can never have, if you're a Kohen eating truma, you cannot have a table that is shanila tum'ah. And because of Kohanim, they make a gezerah on everyone. So, we have to keep the rules as unified as possible. No one could have a table that's shanila tum'ah. Because when you do that, then next thing you know, your son-in-law who's a Kohen comes from yeshiva and sits by your table and Hashem Yirahim. And then he's going to regret marrying a daughter of Amharetz forever. So it's going to become a problem. So you never do it. That's how Bet Shammai sees it. Now you'll see that Bet Hillel disagrees with that notion. Says the Gemara, that's Bet Shammai. Ubet Hillel omrim, al hakeset, you put the mapa, the towel, on the chair. She'imata omer ala shulchan. Because you know what happens if you put it on the shulchan? Something worse happens. In other words, Bet Hillel, as we're going to see in 2 minutes, Bet Hillel agrees that there is a concern to be had when you keep it on the chair. They don't disagree with the concern of Bet Shammai. But they hold there is a greater concern when you put it on the table. Because now, you remember that Bet Hillel do not agree with Bet Shammai that your table has to be tahor. They're not concerned about this whole truma business, as we're going to see momentarily. So automatically, your table could potentially be shanila tum'ah. And if it's shanila tum'ah, you know what could happen? Something much worse than the chair could happen on the table. What could happen? The shulchan is shanila tum'ah. The towel becomes wet. Now the water of the towel becomes rishon latum'ah from the table. And now it's like a board b'reshut harabim. You have a stumbling block on your table. You have your steak falls on top of this towel. Now the whole steak, the food is tameh. Forget about your hands for a moment. There's a towel, a big towel on your table next to your food. And your food could become tameh with that. We'll talk about why not hands in just a moment. But the tameh shulchan le'ochalin. So says the Gemara, why? If you're talking about the shulchan that's tameh, let the shulchan itself make the food tameh. Says the Gemara, no. Hacha be'shulchan sheni askei. Says you're correct. If the shulchan would be rishon, you're right. It would make the food tameh sheni. But we're not talking about that case. As we explained before, the machloket Bet Hillel Bet Shammai over here is when the shulchan is sheni latuma, a lower level of tuma. And says the Gemara, ve'en sheni oseh shlishi bechulin. As we explained yesterday, regular food does not pass this line of sheni latuma. Only truma and kochim could become more than sheni latuma. So therefore, if your table is sheni latuma and your food is not truma and kochim, it doesn't become tameh. So we're not concerned that the table directly is going to make the food tameh. The only problem is if you have liquids that become tameh with tumat sheni, the liquid becomes rishon. Now, if the food touches that, the food becomes tameh because it becomes sheni latuma. And that's the problem.
But they're concerned about the napkin. They're not concerned about the cup that can get tameh from the droplets that fall and then touch the table. The same thing. They're coming back to the cup anyway. They said you could use it.
But remember, Bet Hillel does not concern themselves with droplets on the outside. They say that's not shachiach.
Oh, they say
That's why if you put something wet on the table, what in the world are you doing? That's danger. That's like hazard.
They say you're going to be more careful with the droplets.
Yeah, they used to Bet Hillel would not bang their cups on the table.
Okay, no,
Right. The l'chaim's like that. Yeah. Says the Gemara. You'll tell me shulchan can't be tameh. Meaning, what does Bet Hillel do with the concern of Bet Shammai of maybe your son-in-law is a kohen and what do you do with that? This says we're not concerned about kohanim. Kohanim is the rizim. Kohanim they're on top of their game. You think you have to be concerned about kohanim? Think again. Kohanim, they're on top of their game. You don't have to concern yourself with Kohanim. Kohanim, they're careful in every move they make. They will never sit and eat truma by a table that's tameh. You don't have to make a gezerah and make everyone's life miserable for a Kohen that maybe a Kohen is going to come to eat truma on a table that's sheni l'tumah. It'll never happen because Kohanim are zerizim. They're careful. They're on top of their game. Says the Gemara. ובית הלל סברי מותר להשתמש בשולחן, that's sheni. Wait a second, I jumped a line. Says the Gemara, ולתמו שולחן לאוכלין שבתוכו, הכה בשולחן שני עסקינן ואין שני עושה שלישי בחולין, אלא על ידי משכין. במאי כמפלגי. What is the core concept of their מחלוקת? בית שמאי סברי אסור להשתמש בשולחן שני. Bet Shammai hold you could never ever, even if you're not a Kohen, you're a regular Yisrael, you can never use a shulchan that's sheni latum'ah, gezerah mishum uchlet teruma. It's a gezerah, a rabbinic enactment, because maybe lest you come to host a Kohen, and the Kohen is going to sit and eat by a sheni latum'ah shulchan, and he's eating truma, and truma could become shelishi latum'ah. Ubet Hillel savri mutar l'shtamesh b'shulchan sheni. But there's no problem for a regular person to use a shulchan that's tameh tum'at sheni, because ochlet teruma zerizim hem. Kohanim are zerizim; they're on top of their thing. They will never stumble into eating truma on a table that's sheni latuma. Davar acher, another thing, en netilat yadayim lechulin min haTorah. But Hillel say there is another thing. And that is, en netilat yadayim lechulin min haTorah. Biblically speaking, there is no netilat yadayim for eating chulin. You know, if you're not eating kochim, you're just eating regular food, there's no netilat yadayim concept from the Torah, right?
What's chulin?
Regular, unholy, regular food, not kodesh, right? So says the Gemara, wait a second, what is that? What are you adding with this davar acher? My davar acher, what is this davar acher that you're talking about? Hachi ka'amri lehu bet Hillel levet Shammai. This is what they're saying. Vechitemru, ma shna gabe ochalin dechashina, and ma shna gabe yadayim dechashina. Bet Hillel explained to Bet Shammai, wait a second. We are not denying your concern. As we mentioned before, Bet Hillel has to deal with the Bet Shammai's concern. If you put it on the chair, also, you have the concern of Bet Shammai. Maybe it's going to become tameh and then make your hands tameh. That is something Bet Hillel could speak to as well. Because it could be true. The chair could be tameh, the towel is wet, the mashkin in the towel become tameh, you touch them the next time, your hands are tameh. That is a serious concern. So what do Bet Hillel do with that? Bet Hillel say, you know, you're correct. There is a chashash, there is a legitimate concern on what you say, but there is a legitimate concern on what I say also. Which one trumps what? Because you got to put the towel somewhere. So who decides which concern is a bigger concern? The concern of the towel being on the table and directly making the food tameh, or the concern of towel being on the chair, on the bench, and making my hand tameh, which I'm going to be eating the food? Says the Bet Hillel, I'll prove to you that the concern of the towel being on the table directly making the food tameh is a much greater concern. You know why? Because even though that halachically speaking, I want to make sure my hands that I eat food with is tahor, that's an entirely rabbinic concern. Because the fact that my hands have to be tahor eating food has no source in the Torah for chulin. If I'm not eating kochim, if I'm not eating holy food, I'm eating regular food, there's nowhere in the Torah that has a concept that my hands have to be tahor. Netilat yadayim, the whole tum'at yadayim is rabbinic, and it has no source in the Torah. But the food becoming tameh, which is a concern that we have, if you leave that towel on the table, that is a rabbinic thing as well. But because it's tumat mashkin, it's through the water. But that is something that has a core source in the Torah. That food could become tameh. That is the Rabbanan sheyesh lo ikar min Torah, we call it. It's a rabbinic law that has its roots in a direct Torah prohibition. Says the Gemara. So that's why it's the Rabban. Yeah. So says the Gemara. Why is that? Because there's no netilat yadayim for chulin from the Torah. Mutav sheyetameu yadayim delet lehu ikar midoraita. So if I have to choose between taking a risk that my hands should become tameh or the food should become tameh, I choose my hands 7 days out of the week. Ve'al yetameu ochalin, and the food should not directly become tameh from that towel because it lehu ikar mina Torah. The food becoming tameh, that has a source from the Torah, and hence we are more concerned about that, and that is the proof of Bet Hillel. Bezrat Hashem will continue this in the days to come.
Rabbi. Psychiatrist and psychologist.